Egypt has condemned the Israeli airstrikes on Syria, with the Arab League also demanding action from the UN Security Council. So the League said there has been a dangerous violation of an Arab state's sovereignty there. The Article 2 of the United Nations Charter bans the use of force against the territorial integrity of any state. And let's now see what's the international reaction to all this. To get the latest from the US and the UK, we're now joined live by RT's Gena Chichikan in Washington and Polly Boyko in London. Very nice to see you both. So Polly, let's turn to you first. What has the government said in response to these latest Israeli strikes?
Well, the UK Foreign Secretary has said that this latest Israeli airstrike is making the case stronger for lifting the EU arms embargo on the Syrian opposition. According to William Hague, this recent escalation of the conflict shows that there's a real risk that the violence could spread outside of Syria and into the wider Middle East. Of course, this isn't the first time that the UK has called for an end to this EU arms embargo. In fact, it's become somewhat of a regular occurrence. This is just the latest reason that they're citing for providing extra assistance to the Syrian opposition. And we know that Germany hasn't been keen to provide extra weapons, to the Syrian opposition. We also know that the United Nations have big reservations about it. They say that flooding the region can only create more violence. And of course, many international observers have been keen to point out that arming the Syrian rebels could have some very dangerous consequences for the wider region and for Israel, of course, as well. A lot of people are still very wary of what took place in Libya, the Libyan scenario, when weapons flooded out from Muammar Gaddafi's army and into Mali and Algeria, into neighboring countries. There's still a lot of problems to do with that. So it's a lot of countries are very fearful about making that mistake again, but a very contradictory statement we've seen from the UK Foreign Minister, the one that could in fact create more problems rather than solving the ones that we've got already. So this EU arms embargo comes up for renewal on the 31st of May. We're going to be watching very closely what's going to happen with it and whether Britain will finally get its way in providing weapons for the Syrian opposition.
Gaia, to you now. Are there any indicators that the US knew about Israel's attacks in advance?
Well, the U.S. and Israel, according to both governments, work very closely in terms of intelligence gathering, so it is difficult to believe that Washington didn't know anything about Israel's plans to bomb Damascus. The question that is very much unclear at this point is whether the strikes were really about Hezbollah or whether it was an intervention into the civil war in Syria. The warplanes hit military sites on the outskirts of Damascus. The extent of damage to Syria's military capabilities is not clear at this time. But those were powerful explosions, as witnesses say. Sources in the U.S. government unofficially confirmed the strikes, just as they did a few days ago, and said they were targeting weapons headed for Hezbollah in Lebanon. Damascus sees it differently. They see the strikes as an attempt to boost the morale, as they say, of the rebels. Whether or not the strikes were actually intended as an intervention into the Syrian civil war, they may affect it anyway. There is another concern. The strikes are based on some secret information about some weapons heading somewhere. Neither Tel Aviv nor Washington have officially confirmed anything. And many worry that we're stepping into this very gray area where strikes against another country can be carried out in absolute secrecy. And some unnamed government officials can claim that it had something to do with Hezbollah, and it is supposed to put everyone at ease. Under that logic, they can bomb the whole of Damascus and say it was about Hezbollah. And speaking to Polly's point about the possible arms supplies, the strikes come days after the U.S. Defense Secretary said Washington is rethinking its position on arming the rebels. For the past 2 years, the administration has been reluctant to arm the Syrian rebels directly due to persistent reports of radicalization of anti-Assad forces. These fighters want weapons, and they want heavy weapons. Now, the defense secretary did also say he personally has not decided whether it would be wise to provide weapons to the rebels. But he said the administration is looking at a range of options at the moment. As you can see, there is nothing definitive in the administration's remarks at this stage. But if put together, the events of this week, which now include the Israeli strikes, may have created a certain momentum. And this kind of momentum could actually bolster the forces on the ground and result in more violence in a country where it's already devastating.
RT's Polly Boyko and Gaine Chichakan joining us there live from London and Washington, respectively.